Heywan's hands were still shaking as she wrapped the white cloth around her knuckles. The material felt rough against her skin, just like it always did before a fight. She sat alone in the small underground room beneath the cosmic arena, surrounded by metal walls that hummed with strange energy. Outside, somewhere above her head, thousands of beings from different worlds were taking their seats. They had come to watch her fight, or more likely, they had come to watch her lose. She did not blame them for thinking this way. Humans were rare in the arenas of the galaxy. Most species saw them as soft, weak creatures who should not be allowed to fight at all. The humans on the trading stations and space colonies worked as builders, teachers, and merchants. They did not fight for glory. They did not compete for honor among the stars. But HFY was different. Her trainer, Teo, entered the room carrying a small device. He was an older man with gray streaking his dark hair. His face showed the lines of someone who had spent his whole life around fighters and fighting. He had trained HFY since she was a child, teaching her the ways of judo, wrestling, and the ancient Korean martial arts that had been passed down through generations of her family. Teo placed the device on her wrist and checked the lights that blinked across its small screen. "How are you feeling?" he asked in Korean. Teo always spoke to her in their native language before fights. He said it helped her remember where she came from, remember who she was. HFY did not answer right away. She looked down at her hands, at the muscles that had been built through years of hard work and discipline. She was not as big as the other fighters in the arena. She was not as tall or as heavy as the aliens she would face, but she was fast, and she was smart. She understood fighting in a way that many of the huge, powerful creatures did not. "I am ready," she finally said. Teo smiled, but she could see worry in his eyes. He had seen the files on her opponent. Everyone had. The Krelthar species was known across 3 star systems for their power and their success in arena combat. They had never lost a match. They had won every fight they entered. And today, HFY would face one of their best fighters. The creature's name was Vorshak. In the official records, he stood just over 2 meters tall. His species had 4 muscular limbs that could each be used for fighting. His body was covered in a hard shell that was nearly impossible to break. He had claws, teeth, and reflexes that were faster than most species could even see. When Teo showed her the video of Vorshak's last fight, HFY watched as he tore through an opponent in less than 3 minutes. The opponent was from a species that was supposed to be strong. Vorshak made him look like a child. "You will use speed," Teo said, sitting down beside her. "You will use what you know. Do not try to match his strength. This will only get you hurt." HFY nodded. She had heard these words many times before. Every fight she entered, her opponent was bigger and stronger than her. Every time, people told her she could not win, but she had won. She had won because she was smarter than her opponents. She had won because she understood that fighting was not just about force. It was about timing, balance, and knowing where to strike. An announcement came through the speakers in the small room. It was time. The fighters had to enter the arena now. HFY stood up. Teo stood with her and placed his hand on her shoulder. "Remember who you are," he said. "Remember every person in Korea who has trained you, every person who believed in you when others did not. You carry them with you into that arena." They walked through the corridors beneath the stadium. The walls were smooth and cold. HFY could feel the vibration of the crowd above her. So many beings waiting to see what would happen. Most of them did not think she had a chance. She could feel it in the energy of the building. This was not a match that people believed would be close. This was a match where they expected to see a human fail. The tunnel opened up into the bright light of the arena. The roar of the crowd hit her like a physical force. The stadium was enormous, with sections for different species. There were the tall, thin beings from the outer colonies. There were the heavy, rock-like creatures from the mining stations. There were insect-like beings with too many eyes, and floating creatures that moved through the air like water. And there were humans too, many of them, watching one of their own stand in the arena for perhaps the most important fight of her life. HFY walked to the center of the arena floor. It was a flat, circular space made of some material she did not know the name of. The air around it shimmered slightly. This was where the energy barrier would activate once the match began, keeping the fighters inside and keeping the crowd safe. Then she saw him. Vorshak emerged from the opposite tunnel and the crowd went wild. The Krelthar was even more impressive in person than in the videos. His shell reflected the arena lights. His muscles moved smoothly beneath his hard skin. He clicked and hissed, sounds that came from somewhere deep in his body. On the screens around the arena, these sounds were translated into words of confidence and dominance. He was telling everyone that this human would fall. He was telling them that fighting him was a mistake. The announcer's voice boomed across the stadium in at least 20 different languages. The crowd quieted, listening to the rules being repeated once again. No weapons, no attacks outside the arena boundary, no attacks against opponents who were already defeated. The match would end when one fighter could not continue or when one fighter left the arena. HFY and Vorshak stood facing each other. The distance between them felt very small and very large at the same time. She looked into the Krelthar's eyes and saw intelligence there, but also something else. She saw confidence that came from never having been defeated. She saw strength that had never been tested against someone like her. The gate at the edge of the arena hummed with energy. The barrier activated, and suddenly they were sealed inside their own world. Then the signal came. The match had begun. Vorshak moved first, and he moved like a creature that had never known fear. All four of his limbs came at HFY at once, a blur of sharp edges and terrible speed. The Krelthar fighter expected her to stand and meet his attack. This was how most fighters responded. This was how strength fought strength, but HFY was not like most fighters. She moved to the left, and the Krelthar's upper right limb passed so close to her face that she could feel the air move. She stepped back, and his lower left limb crashed against the arena floor where she had been standing just a moment before. Vorshak hissed in frustration. He had expected to hit her. He had expected this human to be slow and easy. The crowd gasped. They had not expected to see the human move like this. The screens showed the moment again, slowed down so that everyone could see HFY slip out of the way like water flowing around a stone. Vorshak came at her again, this time with more focus. He was not attacking randomly now. He was trying to corner her, trying to cut off her paths of escape. He moved her backward step by step, his attacks coming faster and faster. Each one was powerful enough to break bones. Each one was deadly if it connected. But none of them connected. HFY felt the rhythm of the fight settling into her body. This was something that could not be taught, only learned through experience. She could feel where Vorshak wanted her to go. She could feel what he was thinking before he moved. When his upper limbs attacked high, she went low. When he tried to sweep her legs with his lower limbs, she jumped. When he tried to trap her against the energy barrier at the edge of the arena, she slipped past him and moved back toward the center. The crowd was beginning to change. At first, they had been quiet, shocked that the human was still standing. Now they were becoming louder. Some beings were cheering. The humans in the stadium were making noise that sounded like thunder. Vorshak was becoming angry. HFY could see it in the way his movements became more aggressive, less controlled. This was what she wanted. A fighter who was angry made mistakes. A fighter who was desperate did things without thinking. She had learned this lesson long ago, and it had saved her life many times. She began to strike back. Her first punch was aimed at a pressure point on Vorshak's shoulder. It was a strike that would be weak against most creatures, useless against his hard shell. But HFY knew something about the Krelthar that most fighters did not. She had studied the weakness in their biology. There were places where their shell was thinner, places where their bodies were vulnerable. Her punch landed exactly where she aimed it. Vorshak hissed in pain and pulled back. HFY pressed forward. She moved inside his defense, where his four limbs became more of a problem than an advantage. At close distance, he could not use his full strength. He could not generate the same power. This was her space. This was where her training would serve her best. She struck with her elbows, her knees, and her hands. Each strike landed on a target she had planned before entering the arena. A nerve cluster here, a soft joint there. She was painting a picture of pain across his body, showing him that size and strength were not everything in a fight. Vorshak tried to grab her and throw her, but HFY was ready for this. She twisted her body and used his own strength against him, letting his momentum carry him past her instead of slamming him to the ground. The crowd roared as the Krelthar stumbled, losing his balance for just a moment. But Vorshak recovered quickly. He was still powerful, still dangerous. His attacks were more careful now, more calculated. He was learning. He was starting to understand that this human was different from other opponents he had faced. He was beginning to respect the threat she represented. The match went on for many minutes. Back and forth they fought, attacking and defending, each one looking for the opening that would decide the fight. HFY landed more strikes, and so did Vorshak. But every time he hit her, it was a glancing blow. Every time she struck him, it was with precision and purpose. The scorekeeping system that existed in the arena was tracking points based on the effectiveness of strikes. The judges, beings from neutral species, were recording each moment. HFY was winning. She was actually winning against the Krelthar, who had never lost before. Then the announcer's voice came through the speakers. They announced the current score in terms that all the different species could understand. HFY was ahead by a significant margin. The crowd seemed to understand what this meant. For the first time in this fight, there was real possibility that this human could actually defeat Vorshak. The Krelthar's eyes changed. Something shifted in them. HFY saw it happening, but she was not quite fast enough to understand what it meant. She saw Vorshak's body language change from controlled fighter to something else. Something more desperate, something more dangerous. HFY had seen this in fights before. When a powerful fighter realized they might lose, some of them changed. They stopped following the rules. They stopped thinking about winning fairly and started thinking only about winning at any cost. She adjusted her stance slightly, preparing for something new. She did not know what Vorshak was planning, but she could feel it coming. The air in the arena seemed to become heavier. The sound of the crowd seemed to fade away. Everything became very quiet and very still. Vorshak took a step back, as if he was about to give up. HFY relaxed for just a fraction of a second, wondering if the Krelthar was preparing to concede the match. That was when everything changed. Vorshak lunged at HFY from behind. It was a move that should never happen in a properly organized arena match. It was forbidden. It was against every rule that had been spoken before the fight began. But the Krelthar did not care about rules. He cared only about winning now. His body moved with all his remaining speed and power, determined to end this fight the only way he knew how, with force. The crowd made a sound like a single creature gasping in shock. People stood up from their seats. The humans in the stadium let out shouts of protest. Everyone could see that this was wrong. Everyone could see that Vorshak had broken the basic rules of combat. But HFY did not have time to think about rules or protest. She had only a fraction of a second to react. Her body, trained through thousands of hours of practice and discipline, responded without needing her mind to tell it what to do. She pivoted on her left foot, rotating her entire body with perfect timing. Vorshak's attack had given him momentum that was now working against him. His large form was moving forward with all his strength, unable to stop or change direction. HFY's right arm rose up and hooked beneath one of his upper limbs, catching him right at the joint where his limb connected to his body. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The roar of the crowd paused. The lights of the arena seemed to freeze in place. HFY and Vorshak were locked together in a moment of perfect physics, her skill meeting his strength and winning. Then she pulled. HFY used every bit of her training, every ounce of power that her body possessed, and she used Vorshak's own momentum against him. This was the principle that she had learned years ago as a child in the dojo in Seoul. Do not fight strength with strength. Instead, use the opponent's strength. Let their power become their weakness. Vorshak's large body lifted off the ground. He became airborne, flying through the air like a creature made of nothing. The Krelthar made a sound that was somewhere between a roar and a scream as he realized what was happening to him. For the first time in his life, he was being thrown like he was nothing at all. He crashed through the energy barrier that separated the arena from the spectator section. The barrier flickered as his body passed through it, designed to stop energy attacks but not solid objects. His chitinous body smashed into the seats beyond, sending alien spectators scattering in all directions. He knocked over other beings, broke several chairs, and finally came to rest in a twisted position near the back of the seating area. The stadium fell silent, complete and total silence. Nobody made a sound. Nobody moved. It was as if the entire universe had stopped to understand what had just happened. The Krelthar fighter, the warrior who had never been defeated, the creature that people had believed was unstoppable, had been thrown out of the arena by a human woman who weighed half what he did. In the underground section of the arena, in the medical bay where fighters were monitored, the staff who worked with Vorshak began to run. They knew their fighter had been hurt, possibly seriously. They would need to get him to better medical facilities right away, but the crowd did not let their shock last very long. The silence broke like something shattering. First, one human voice shouted in celebration. Then another joined it. Then more. Within seconds, the humans in the stadium were making a noise so loud that it seemed like the entire building might shake. They were jumping up and down. They were hugging each other. They were pointing at HFY with wonder and pride. Other species began to respond. The floating creatures moved in excited patterns through the air. The rock-like beings made deep sounds that vibrated through the stadium. Even some of the insect-like creatures clicked in what seemed like approval. Not everyone was happy about what they had just seen. Some beings seemed confused or disappointed that the Krelthar had lost. But many of them were celebrating. HFY stood alone in the center of the arena, breathing heavily. Her muscles were shaking with the effort of what she had just done. She was tired. She was sweating. But she was also alive with something else, a feeling of power and accomplishment that was almost impossible to describe. The referee, a neutral being that looked like a floating orb surrounded by lights, came down toward the arena floor. It emitted a sound that was translated into many languages. The sound meant one thing. The match was over. HFY had won. A cheer came from the crowd, and this time it seemed like even more beings were participating. Some of the other aliens who had been unsure before seemed to have changed their minds. They understood now what they had just witnessed. They understood that they had seen something important, something that would be remembered. Medics arrived at the seating area where Vorshak lay. They checked his body and confirmed what everyone already knew. He was hurt. He was defeated. More importantly, he was still breathing. The throw had been powerful, but HFY had done what she had been taught to do. She had used exactly enough force to win, no more and no less. The announcers began speaking in all their different languages. They repeated the same words over and over. The human fighter had won. The Krelthar fighter was defeated. The match was finished, but everyone in the stadium understood that something much bigger had just happened. The galaxy's understanding of humans had changed in that single moment. The small, weak creatures from the blue planet called Earth had just proven that they possessed something that size and strength alone could not defeat. They had proven that humans could fight with skill and discipline. They had proven that humans belonged among the other species of the stars. HFY raised her arms, and the crowd responded with a roar that seemed to shake the universe itself. The moment seemed to last forever. The stadium remained in that strange, quiet state where nobody was quite sure how to respond to what they had just witnessed. It was like the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Some beings in the crowd looked confused. Others looked shocked. A few appeared to be angry, but most of them seemed to be struggling to process the information their minds were receiving. What had happened did not fit with how the galaxy understood the world. The Krelthar were supposed to be the strongest fighters. Humans were supposed to be weak, yet the Krelthar lay defeated in the stands, and the humans stood in the center of the arena, victorious. The rules of how the universe worked seemed to have broken. Then something changed. It was not a big change at first. It was just one human voice, calling out in celebration. Then another human joined in, and another. The celebration started slowly, but it grew like fire spreading through dry wood. More humans were standing up screaming, celebrating. They were pointing at HFY. They were jumping and dancing and making noise that expressed pure joy and pride. The celebration spread to other species. The creatures from the mining colonies were making deep sounds that shook the stadium. The tall, thin beings from the outer colonies were making high-pitched sounds of excitement. Even some of the insect-like creatures were clicking in rapid patterns. It seemed like the entire universe was beginning to understand that something extraordinary had just happened. The roar grew louder and louder. It started as a quiet thing and became a thunder that seemed to shake the very bones of everyone in the stadium. This was not just celebration for one fighter winning a match. This was something bigger. This was the sound of minds being changed. This was the sound of history being made. In the stands, in the medical sections, in the announcer's booth, and in the broadcast studios throughout the galaxy, beings stopped what they were doing and watched. They watched the human woman standing alone in the arena. They watched as the crowd continued to celebrate. They watched as the impossible became real. Teo stood with tears streaming down his face. He had watched HFY grow up. He had taught her everything he knew about fighting. He had believed in her when others did not. And now, in this moment, everything that he had worked for was coming true. He was not crying because his student had won a single match. He was crying because he understood what this moment meant for all of humanity. In cities on Earth, in colonies on distant planets, in trading stations scattered throughout the stars, humans watched the replay of the throw. They watched it again and again. They watched as their kind proved that they could stand against the strongest the galaxy had to offer. They watched as one person changed what it meant to be human in this vast universe. The Krelthar in the stands slowly rose to their feet. Some of them helped Vorshak, who was badly hurt, but able to walk. The great fighter who had never been defeated looked at HFY across the arena. Even from far away, she could see the change in his eyes. The confidence was gone. The belief in his own superiority was gone. What remained was something much smaller, a recognition of something he had never experienced before. He had been beaten by someone smaller, someone he had believed was weak. And now, he had to live with that knowledge forever. Vorshak did not look angry anymore. He looked sad. He looked tired. He looked like someone whose entire understanding of his place in the universe had been shaken. The referees made their official announcements. The match was declared complete. Illegal attack by the Krelthar. Clear victory for the human fighter. HFY's record remained undefeated. But more importantly, the galaxy now knew that humans had a champion who could defeat even the strongest among them. Medics wanted to check HFY for injuries. She had taken some hits during the match, and there was a small cut on her left arm where one of Vorshak's claws had found its mark. But her injuries were small compared to what they could have been. She was tired, but she was whole. She was alive. As the medical workers looked at her arm, the humans in the stadium continued to celebrate. Some of them were singing songs in Korean. Others were singing songs in English. Still others were singing in languages that had been created on distant planets by colonists far from home. But all of the songs carried the same message. They carried pride. They carried hope. They carried a new understanding of what humans could be. The announcer's voice came through the speakers one more time. It stated the facts of the match in simple terms that all species could understand. But everyone in the stadium already knew these facts. What they were really thinking about was something else. They were thinking about what this victory meant for the future. In the broadcast studios, the commentators were already starting to discuss it. Some of them were angry. Some of them were amazed. Some of them were frightened. But they were all talking about the same thing. The balance of power in the galaxy had just changed. Humans were no longer the novelty species that other beings could ignore. Humans were players on the great stage of the cosmos, and they had just proved it beyond all doubt. The crowd noise was still loud, but it was beginning to change. The celebration was becoming something more thoughtful. People were standing, watching HFY, understanding that they had witnessed something important, something that would be remembered for generations, something that would be told as a story on thousands of worlds. HFY looked up at all of them. She looked at the humans cheering for her. She looked at the other species processing what they had just seen. She looked at Vorshak in the stands, defeated and confused. And she understood what had just happened. This was not just her victory. This was humanity's victory. This was the moment when the galaxy learned that humans could not be underestimated. The roar continued to build. It was the sound of a universe changing its mind about an entire species. It was the sound of history. The arena slowly began to quiet down. HFY stood in the center of the floor, still catching her breath. Her muscles were tired from the fight, and her mind was still processing everything that had happened. A few moments ago, she had been in danger. Moments before that, she had been unsure if she could actually win. But now she was standing here, victorious, with the eyes of the entire galaxy watching her. The officials approached her with a microphone. It was a device that would translate her words into every language that was spoken in the stadium. More importantly, it would send her words across the galaxy through the broadcast networks. Anything she said in this moment would be heard by billions of beings on distant worlds. They were waiting to hear what the human fighter would say now that she had done the impossible. HFY took the microphone. Her hand was shaking slightly, but when she spoke, her voice was clear and steady. "I stand before you not as a victor looking down on the defeated," she began, her Korean words flowing through the translator and becoming the language of 100 different species. "I stand before you as someone who was taught a long time ago that true strength comes from discipline, not from size. It comes from understanding, not from power. It comes from respect for your opponent, even when you are fighting against them." The crowd was listening. Every being in the stadium was quiet now, hanging on her words. "The Krelthar are strong," she continued. "Their strength is real. I do not deny this. But strength alone is not enough to win a fight. A fighter must also have wisdom. A fighter must know when to strike and when to wait. A fighter must understand that a larger force can be defeated by a smaller force if that smaller force is cleverer, faster, and more disciplined." HFY paused for a moment, looking out at the crowd. She could see humans in the stands, their faces showing pride and emotion. She could see other species, their strange faces turned toward her, watching her speak. "I was taught by my ancestors," she said. "My people, the humans, have existed for a very long time on our world. We have developed many ways of fighting and many ways of thinking about conflict. These ways are not about overwhelming your enemy with more power. They are about balance. They are about understanding the movement and the energy of the fight. They are about knowing yourself and knowing your opponent." She took a breath. "Today, I have shown something to this galaxy," HFY said, and her voice was growing stronger as she spoke. "I have shown that humans are not weak just because we are smaller. I have shown that humans are not inferior just because we do not look like other species. What I have shown is that humans possess something that cannot be taught in a moment. It comes from years of discipline, from studying and practicing and believing in yourself even when others do not believe in you." The crowd was reacting now. Some species were making sounds of agreement. Some beings were moving in ways that showed excitement or understanding. "The Krelthar challenged us today," HFY said. "They came to the arena believing that their strength would be enough. But I believe that all beings in this universe have something to teach each other. We have different ways of fighting. We have different ways of understanding the world. And when we meet in a place like this arena, we have the chance to learn from each other. We have the chance to grow." She looked directly at the location where Vorshak was being helped by medics. "I respect the fighter I faced today," she said. "I respect the Krelthar. I hope that this match, even though I won, will teach us all something important. It should teach all of us that we cannot judge the worth of something just by looking at its size or its appearance. We must look deeper. We must see the discipline. We must see the skill. We must see the heart." The crowd reacted with sounds of approval from many different species. The humans in the stadium were standing, celebrating, but they were also listening to every word. "Humans are not weak," HFY continued. "We are not inferior. We have trained for generations in the art of fighting and the art of understanding conflict. We have philosophers and teachers who have spent their lives studying how to achieve victory without destroying the world around us. We have warriors who understand that true victory comes not just from defeating your enemy, but from defeating them in a way that honors both the winner and the loser." She raised her arm, and the crowd made a sound like thunder. "I stand here today as a human champion," she said. "But I do not stand here to look down on other species. I stand here to say that humans belong here, in this great cosmos. We belong in the arenas. We belong in the councils. We belong among the stars. Not because we are the strongest, not because we are the fastest, not because we are the most powerful. We belong here because we are disciplined. We belong here because we understand that wisdom is more powerful than force. We belong here because we are human." The stadium erupted. The roar was louder than before. It came from humans and aliens alike. Some beings that had come to the arena expecting to see a human defeated were now cheering for what HFY had just said. Others were still processing it, but they were thinking about what her words meant. The translation of her speech began to spread across the galaxy immediately. On a dozen different planets, humans who had been considered second-class citizens by other species watched the replay and felt something change inside them. They felt hope. They felt pride. They felt like they belonged to something important. On worlds where humans had never been before, beings watched the speech and began to reconsider what they thought about this strange species from Earth. They watched the human woman stand alone in the arena, speaking with confidence and wisdom, and they understood that humans had something to offer the universe that was more than just their bodies. HFY handed the microphone back to the officials. She was not comfortable with too much talking. She was a fighter, not a politician. But her words had done their work. The world had heard her, and the world had understood her message. Humans were not weak. Humans were not inferior. Humans had strength that came from within, from discipline and wisdom and the determination to always do the right thing, even when it was difficult. As she left the arena, the crowd continued to cheer. The celebration would continue for hours, long into the night. But Heywan knew that something had changed. The universe would never look at humans the same way again.